Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now let's begin this one. Chapter 1. Ghosts and Goodbyes. Arthur Rios had killed his first man at 23 in the mountains of Afghanistan. His last kill came at 42 in a compound outside Mosul that officially didn't exist. 19 years with Delta Force had carved away everything soft in him, leaving behind something harder than the desert rock where he'd learned to survive. The doctors called it PTSD. Arthur called it Tuesday. He'd retired 3 years ago to a quiet neighborhood in Colorado Springs, bought a small house with a workshop in the garage, and tried to remember what normal felt like. The answer was, it didn't. Normal was a language he'd forgotten, but his daughter Hannah spoke it fluently. And watching her live the life he'd protected from thousands of miles away made the sleepless nights worthwhile. She was 24 now, working as a graphic designer, living in an apartment across town. Arthur saw her every Sunday for dinner. It was their ritual, sacred as any mission briefing. This particular Sunday, she was late. Arthur stood at his kitchen window watching the street. Old habits died hard. He'd already counted 3 cars that had passed twice, noted the broken streetlight 2 houses down, and identified the man walking his dog as Wesley Woodard, his former squadmate who ran a boxing gym downtown. Wesley raised a hand. Arthur nodded back. Hannah's Honda pulled up at 6:47 p.m., 13 minutes late. She was never late. He opened the door before she knocked. One look at her face told him everything had changed. "Dad," she said, and her voice cracked like thin ice. The bruise on her wrist was 5 days old, healing from purple to yellow-green. Arthur saw it the moment she pushed her sleeve back to check her phone. She caught him looking and pulled the fabric down quickly, but the damage was done. Hannah. His voice was flat, controlled. This was the voice that had ordered men into kill zones, the voice that didn't shake. "Who did that to you?" "It's nothing. Who?" She sat at the kitchen table, and the story spilled out in fragments. Brandon Lindsay. They'd been dating for 8 months. He was charming at first, funny, attentive. Then came the jealousy, the checking her phone, the accusations. 3 months ago, he'd shoved her during an argument. 2 weeks ago, he'd grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave marks when she tried to leave a party early. "I broke up with him yesterday," Hannah said, staring at her hands. "He didn't take it well. He showed up at my apartment this morning demanding we talk. He was saying things, Dad, scary things." Arthur's jaw tightened. "What things?" "He said," she swallowed hard, "he said I couldn't just walk away from him, that I belonged to him. And when I told him I'd call the police, he laughed. He said my dad was just some weak old dude who wouldn't do nothing. He said nobody could protect me from him." Weak, old, wouldn't do nothing. Arthur remembered the mountains. He remembered the compound. He remembered 19 years of doing things that needed doing. "Where does he live, yeah?" Arthur asked quietly. "Dad, no. I just need to vent, okay? I'm handling it. I got a restraining order yesterday." "Where does he work?" "Promise me you won't do anything crazy." Arthur looked at his daughter, his only child, the reason he'd come home from every deployment, the person who'd waited for him through 19 years of missing birthdays and Christmases. She had his eyes, dark and determined, but her mother's softness that the world hadn't beaten out yet. "I promise," he said, "that I'll do exactly what needs to be done." Chapter 2. The Warning Signs. Brandon Lindsay's Facebook page was public. Rookie mistake. Within an hour, Arthur knew everything. Brandon worked at Morrison Logistics, a warehouse operation on the industrial east side. He drove a modified Dodge Charger. He posted gym selfies with frequency that suggested narcissism, content that suggested steroid use. His friend list included several individuals with criminal records. Arthur had Wesley run a few names through his gym's network, and the results weren't promising. The cousin caught Arthur's attention, Clint Lindsay. No Facebook presence, but Wesley recognized the name immediately. "Clint Lindsay is bad news," Wesley said over the phone. His voice had the gravelly quality of a man who'd taken too many punches. "Works freelance, if you catch my meaning. The kind of freelance that involves making people disappear. You sure you want to poke this hornet's nest, Arthur?" "I'm not poking anything," Arthur said. "I'm eliminating a threat." "Delta Force is over, brother. You're a civilian now. Civilians have rules." "So do operators. Rule 1. Complete the mission." Wesley was quiet for a moment. "What's the mission?" "Protecting my daughter." "Then you need to know what you're walking into. Brandon's connected. His cousin's connected. This isn't some punk kid you can scare straight." "I don't scare people straight, Wesley. I eliminate problems." Another silence, then, "Gym's open if you need a place to think or train. I'll be there tomorrow." That night, Arthur didn't sleep. Instead, he sat in his garage workshop, cleaning weapons that officially didn't exist. A civilian contractor had helped him lose certain equipment during his exit from service. The Glock 19 was clean, untraceable. The KA bar knife had been with him in 7 countries. The suppressors were vacuum-sealed in Mylar, preserved like fine wine. He wasn't cleaning them to use them. He was cleaning them to remember who he was. The next morning, Hannah called. She was crying. "He showed up at my work," she said, voice shaking. "He waited in the parking lot. When I came out for lunch, he was leaning against my car. He acted like nothing was wrong, like we were still together, like the restraining order was a joke." "Did he touch you?" "He tried to grab my arm. My coworker Marlene came out and he backed off, but Dad—" She was sobbing now. "I'm scared. The police said they can't do anything unless he actually violates the order directly, and they said him being in a public parking lot doesn't count. What am I supposed to do?" Arthur stared at the wall of his garage, where a shadow box held his service medals: Bronze Star, Silver Star, Purple Heart, 19 years of official recognition for doing what needed to be done in the shadows. "You're supposed to trust me," he said. "Can you do that, honey?" "Dad, please don't do anything that'll get you in trouble." "I won't get in trouble," Arthur said, and he meant it. "The innocent don't get in trouble. Only the guilty do." Chapter 3. The Professional Assessment. Wesley's gym occupied a converted warehouse in a neighborhood where the police didn't patrol unless someone was already dead. The sign outside read, "Woodard's Boxing," but everyone called it The Yard. It's where fighters trained when they had something to prove or something to forget. Arthur arrived at dawn. Wesley was already there, working the heavy bag with methodical precision. He'd lost his left eye in Fallujah, the scar tissue a pale ridge across his face. The glass eye didn't track quite right, but his remaining eye saw more than most people, with 2. "You look like hell," Wesley said, not stopping his combinations. "Didn't sleep. Thinking or planning?" "Both." Wesley landed one final hook that sent the bag swinging, then stepped back, breathing hard. "Tell me about the kid." Arthur ran through what he knew. Brandon Lindsay, 27, warehouse worker, steroid user, narcissist with violent tendencies, connected through his cousin Clint, who worked as a hitman for mid-level organized crime. "And you want to what, exactly? Beat him up? Kill him?" "I want him to stop being a threat to my daughter." "That's not a plan, Arthur. That's a feeling." Arthur started wrapping his hands, the ritual familiar, despite 3 years away from regular training. "I'm going to give him a chance to walk away. I'm going to make the threat clear. If he's smart, he'll understand. And if he's not smart, then I'll escalate appropriately." Wesley watched him for a moment, his good eye unblinking. "You know the military justice system gave you cover when you did what you did. Out here, it's just murder. They'll put you in prison, and Hannah will be alone. They'll put me in prison if they catch me." "Arthur, I've been doing threat assessment and elimination for 19 years, Wes. I'm not some amateur who's going to make mistakes. I'll give him the chance to be smart. If he's not, I'll be smarter." Wesley sighed and picked up focus mitts. "Then let's make sure you're ready. You're 3 years out of practice, and age comes for all of us. Let's see what you've still got." They trained for 2 hours. Arthur's cardio wasn't what it used to be. He felt it in his lungs after the first 20 minutes. But the muscle, memory remained. His hands knew where to go. His feet knew how to move. The body remembered what the mind tried to forget. Afterwards, sitting on the ring apron with water bottles sweating between them, Wesley asked the question Arthur had been avoiding. "What's your exit strategy? Let's say you handle Brandon. What about Clint? What about the organization Clint works for? You can't fight everyone, Arthur, not anymore. I don't need to fight everyone, Arthur said. I just need to make the cost of threatening Hannah higher than anyone's willing to pay. That's called deterrence. It doesn't always work. Then I'll move to elimination. Jesus! Wesley scrubbed his face with both hands. I can't be part of this if you're talking murder. I'm not asking you to be part of anything. I'm just training at your gym. And if someone shows up asking questions, you'll tell them the truth. I was training, and you tried to talk me out of doing anything stupid. Wesley looked at him for a long moment. You're going today, aren't you? To the warehouse? Arthur nodded. Take your phone. Keep it recording, audio at least. If something happens, you'll want evidence it was self-defense. I'm not planning on anything happening. Arthur, brother, you've got that look. I saw it before ops in Afghanistan. You're mission-focused. That's good for staying alive, but bad for staying free. Promise me you'll be smart about this. Arthur stood and extended his hand. I'll be what I need to be. They shook, and Arthur saw the concern in Wesley's remaining eye. Good men worrying about good men. It's what kept them alive overseas, but this wasn't overseas. This was home. And the rules were different when someone threatened your family. Arthur drove to the industrial district, to Morrison Logistics, to a confrontation that would change everything. He was done being weak, done being old, done doing nothing. Chapter 4. The Warehouse Lesson. Morrison Logistics occupied a sprawling complex of corrugated metal buildings and loading docks. 18-wheelers idled in the parking lot, belching diesel fumes into the cold morning air. Arthur arrived at 10:47 a.m., during what he'd learned was the mid-shift break. He parked his truck in a visitor spot and walked toward the main entrance with a purposeful stride of someone who belonged. The office manager, a tired-looking woman named Dina Copeland, according to her nameplate, looked up from her desk. Can I help you? I'm here to see Brandon Lindsay. Personal matter. Dina's eyes flickered with something. Recognition, maybe, or concern. Brandon's on shift. We don't usually allow... I won't take much of his time. Something in Arthur's tone made her reconsider whatever policy she was about to cite. Loading dock 3. Through that door, turn left, follow the signs. Arthur nodded his thanks. The warehouse was a cavern of metal shelving units reaching 30 feet high, forklifts beeping their reversing warnings, men in safety vests, shouting over the industrial noise. Arthur spotted Brandon Lindsay immediately, tall, heavily muscled, loading boxes onto a pallet. He wore a sleeveless shirt despite the cold, showing off arms that had definitely seen chemical enhancement. Brandon didn't notice Arthur's approach. He was laughing with two co-workers, saying something about crazy bitches that made the other men laugh. Brandon Lindsay, Arthur said. Brandon turned, irritation flashing across his face before recognition dawned. He'd probably seen Arthur in photos at Hannah's apartment. The irritation transformed into something uglier, contempt. Well, the famous dad. Brandon set down the box he'd been holding with exaggerated slowness. Hannah send you to fight her battles? Hannah didn't send me. I'm here on my own. The two co-workers had stopped working, sensing entertainment. One of them, stocky, bearded, mid-30s, stepped closer. Everything okay, Brandon? Yeah, Floyd. Just Hannah's old man coming to have a talk. Brandon's voice dripped with mockery. Ain't that sweet? Floyd Young, Arthur noted. Warehouse supervisor, based on the radio clipped to his vest. I'm here to deliver a message, Arthur said calmly. Stay away from my daughter. Don't call her. Don't text her. Don't drive by her apartment. Don't show up at her work. The restraining order isn't a suggestion. Brandon laughed, a sharp barking sound. Or what? You're going to do something about it? Look at you, old man. You're like, what, 50? You think you scare me? I'm 53, Arthur said, and I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to save your life. That got more laughter, from Brandon and his audience both. Floyd stepped even closer, trying to look intimidating. You threatening people on company property. I think you need to leave before we call the cops. I'm leaving, Arthur said, right after Brandon understands the situation. I understand perfectly, Brandon said, his voice dropping to something meaner. I understand Hannah's got a weak old dude for a father who thinks he can roll up here and what? Fight me? He flexed, muscles rippling under tattooed skin. I bench 420, old man. I'd break you in half. Floyd grinned. Gonna fight, senior citizen? Because I'd love to watch that. Arthur had run the calculations in his head before he ever walked through the door. 6 men in the immediate vicinity, including Brandon and Floyd. 3 forklifts, 2 of them running. Metal shelving units, concrete floor, multiple overhead cranes, exits at 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and 6 o'clock. Closest security camera pointed northwest. Wouldn't catch this angle clearly. He'd given Brandon the chance. No, Arthur said quietly. I'm not going to fight. I'm going to educate. What happened next took 4 minutes. Brandon swung first. Predictable, telegraphed, the wide haymaker of someone who relied on size and strength. Arthur stepped inside the arc, drove his elbow into Brandon's solar plexus, and swept his leg. Brandon went down hard, the air exploding from his lungs. Floyd rushed him. Arthur caught his arm, used his momentum against him, and introduced his face to the concrete floor. Something crunched. The third man, the one who'd stayed quiet, pulled a utility knife. Arthur kicked it from his hand, followed with a palm strike to the sternum that sent him stumbling back into a forklift. The driver, startled, hit the brake. The man collapsed, gasping. Brandon was up again, roaring, grabbing a 2x4 from a pallet. He swung wild. Arthur ducked, closed the distance, and delivered 3 precise strikes, kidney, knee, elbow, to the jaw. Brandon dropped the board and collapsed. The next 2 came together, smarter, or maybe just scared. Arthur handled them methodically. One got a broken nose from a headbutt, the other took a knee to the liver that put him on the ground vomiting. Floyd, bleeding from his face, tried one more time. Arthur caught him in a rear naked choke, applied pressure until he tapped out, then dropped him. The entire warehouse had gone silent, except for the beeping forklifts and the groaning of injured men. Arthur stood in the center of the chaos, breathing hard but steady. He looked down at Brandon, who was clutching his ribs, blood streaming from his nose. "Call an ambulance," Arthur said to the warehouse at large. Then, quieter, just for Brandon. "If you come near my daughter again, this will look like foreplay. Am I clear?" Brandon nodded, eyes wide with fear and pain. Arthur walked out through the same door he'd entered. In the office, Dina Copeland stared at him, phone already in hand. "You should probably call 911, Arthur said politely. She already was. Chapter 5. The professional's pride. Arthur was 3 blocks away when he realized he'd made a mistake, not the confrontation itself. That had been necessary, measured, and effective. The mistake was simpler. He'd underestimated Brandon's connections. The phone call came that evening while Arthur was cooking dinner. Unknown number. He answered anyway. "Arthur Rios?" The voice was smooth, professional, the kind of voice that negotiated contracts and death sentences with equal ease. "Speaking. My name is Clint Lindsay. Brandon's my cousin. I think we need to talk." Arthur set down his knife, moved away from the kitchen window. "Talk. You put 6 men in the hospital today. Brandon's got a fractured rib, broken nose, and more bruises than I can count. Now, in my line of work, I appreciate a man who's efficient, but you touched family, Mr. Rios. That's a problem. Your cousin threatened my daughter. He grabbed her, stalked her. That's a bigger problem." A pause. "You're former military. Someone ran your name for me. Delta Force, 19 years, impressive service record. But you've been out for 3 years. You're not that man anymore." "That's where you're wrong," Arthur said quietly. "I'm always that man. I just usually keep him contained." Then, "Let's talk containment. I'm a professional. I solve problems for money. But Brandon's blood, and blood means I solve this one for free. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize, pay his medical bills, and stay the hell away from him. In return, I won't visit you. And if I refuse, then I'll be waiting outside your house when you least expect it. And Mr. Rios, I'm very good at waiting." The line went dead. Arthur stood in his kitchen, phone still pressed to his ear, calculating. Clint Lindsay wasn't like Brandon. He was trained, professional, patient. Exactly the kind of opponent that required a different approach. His phone buzzed. Text message from Hannah. "Dad, Brandon's friends are posting about you on social media. They're calling you crazy. One of them says Clint Lindsay is going to handle you. Dad, Clint is dangerous. Please be careful." Arthur replied, "I'm always careful. Stay at Marlene's tonight. Don't go home. Dad, what are you going to do? What needs to be done?" He spent the next hour making preparations, not the preparations of a frightened man fortifying his home, but the preparations of a hunter setting a trap. Clint had made his own mistake. He'd announced his intentions. In Arthur's world, that was tactical suicide. The security cameras went up first, not the obvious kind, but the small, nearly invisible ones that could record in low light. Then came the modifications to the locks, the subtle rearrangement of furniture, the preparation of the space. If Clint Lindsay was coming to his house, Arthur would make sure it was the last mistake he ever made. By midnight, everything was ready. Arthur sat in his living room with the lights off, Glock 19 within reach, and waited. But Clint didn't come that night. He came 3 days later. Chapter 6. The Professional's Error. Arthur had learned patience in the mountains of Afghanistan, where sniper hides lasted for days, and the first to move was the first to die. 3 days of waiting was nothing. He maintained his routine, morning workouts at Wesley's gym, grocery shopping, coffee at the local diner. But his awareness never dimmed. Every car got cataloged. Every stranger got assessed. Every shadow got checked. Hannah stayed at Marlene's. Arthur visited her there, bringing food, ensuring she was safe. The restraining order had been upgraded after the warehouse incident, and Brandon was facing assault charges after trying to press charges of his own, until security footage from the warehouse mysteriously disappeared and several witnesses suddenly couldn't remember the details. Arthur had friends in low places. They owed him favors from his military days. A few phone calls made Brandon's legal problems multiply while Arthur's evaporated. On the third night, at 11:47 p.m., Arthur's perimeter alarm chimed softly. Someone had crossed the invisible infrared beam at his property line. Arthur was in position before the alarm's echo faded. Living room dark, night vision. Monocular in place, weapon ready. He watched his front lawn through the window. Clint Lindsay moved like a professional, low, slow checking angles. He wore dark clothing, carried what looked like a suppressed pistol. He paused at the porch, examining the door lock with a penlight. Arthur had left the door unlocked. Clint tested the knob, found it open, went still. Professionals didn't trust unlocked doors. It suggested a trap, but Clint's arrogance, the pride of a man who'd never been caught, won out over caution. He entered. The house was dark, quiet. Clint moved through the entryway into the living room, weapon up, checking corners. He was good. If Arthur had been a normal civilian, Clint would have owned the space in seconds. But Arthur wasn't normal. He was behind Clint, had been since the moment he crossed the threshold, moving in perfect silence through the mudroom entrance that Clint's recon had missed. Arthur pressed the suppressor of his own pistol against Clint's skull. "Drop it," Arthur whispered. Clint froze. Then, slowly, he bent to place his weapon on the floor. "Kick it away," Clint complied. "Hands behind your head. Interlace your fingers. Kneel." Clint knelt, still maintaining professional calm. "Smart," he said quietly. The unlocked door. Most people would lock up tight. You knew I'd be suspicious, but come anyway. "I know how professionals think," Arthur said, "because I am one." "So now what? You call the cops? They arrest me for B&E? I make bail in 6 hours and we do this dance again?" "No," Arthur said. "Now we talk about Brandon." "You're not going to shoot me. You turn on the lights, cops see evidence, you go to prison. You've got nothing but a Mexican standoff." Arthur smiled in the darkness. "Who said anything about shooting you?" The lights came on. Not the overhead lights. Those would have made Clint's pupils contract, disoriented him. No, these were softer, strategic, mounted in corners that Clint hadn't noticed in his infrared sweep. But what Clint definitely noticed was the video camera on the tripod, red recording light active, pointed directly at them, and the man standing next to it, Wesley Woodard holding his own pistol. "Evening, Clint," Wesley said. Nice of you to break into my friend's house while we recorded the whole thing. Clint's professional calm cracked. You're bluffing. Am I? Wesley moved to the laptop connected to the camera. Let's see. You crossing the property line. Check. You entering through an unlocked door with a weapon. Check. You... He pressed a button, and Clint's voice played back. You call the cops, they arrest me for B&E, I make bail in 6 hours. Wesley grinned. Confession of intent, check. Arthur lowered his weapon, stepped around to face Clint. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell Brandon to leave Colorado, tonight. If he's still in the state by morning, I send this video to the police and every criminal organization you've ever worked for. They'll know you got caught on camera, sloppy, admitting to crimes. Your reputation dies. Your career dies. Maybe you die depending on which clients get nervous about what you might say to avoid prison. You can't. I already did, Arthur said. The video's backed up to 3 different cloud services. You can't stop it. But you can save Brandon and yourself by convincing him to disappear. Because, Clint, let me be clear. If you or Brandon come near my daughter again, I won't call the cops. I won't record anything. I'll just remove the problem permanently, and no one will ever find the evidence. Do you understand me? Clint stared up at him, seeing perhaps for the first time that he'd misjudged his target. Arthur wasn't a frightened father. He was a man who'd spent 19 years eliminating targets in the shadows, who knew exactly how to make people vanish, who had done it before and would do it again without hesitation. I understand, Clint said quietly. Good. Now get out of my house. You've got until sunrise to make Brandon disappear. After that, the video goes public, and you both have much bigger problems than me. Clint stood slowly, retrieved his weapon with deliberate care, and walked to the door. He paused at the threshold. You made an enemy tonight, Rios? No, Arthur said. I eliminated a threat. There's a difference. Clint left. Wesley closed and locked the door behind him, then turned to Arthur with an expression mixing respect and concern. That was reckless. What if he'd shot you when he came in? He's a professional. Professionals assess before they fire. I counted on that. And if you'd counted wrong? Arthur ejected the magazine from his pistol, showed Wesley that it was empty. Then I would have been very disappointed in my assessment skills. Jesus Christ, Arthur, you bluffed a hitman with an empty gun? The gun was never the weapon, Wes. The camera was. The threat to his reputation. That's what professionals fear most, exposure. Wesley shook his head, but he was smiling. You're either the smartest man I know or the craziest. Why not both? They spent the next hour securing the recordings, uploading them to encrypted storage, setting up dead man switches that would release the footage if Arthur didn't check in daily. Then Wesley left, and Arthur sat alone in his living room, waiting for sunrise. At 5:23 a.m., he received a text from an unknown number. He's gone. We're gone. This is over. Arthur deleted the message and allowed himself to breathe, but he should have known better. Professionals like Clint Lindsay don't forgive. They wait. They plan. And they come back when you least expect it. Chapter 7, The Mother's Gambit. Brandon Lindsay left Colorado, but the story didn't end there. It never does when pride is involved. 2 weeks of peace lulled Arthur into something resembling normalcy. Hannah moved back to her apartment with a new security system Arthur installed personally. She started therapy to process the relationship trauma. Arthur returned to his routine of coffee and crossword puzzles, almost believing he could slide back into retirement. Then Bobby Lindsay appeared. She arrived at Arthur's door on a Tuesday morning, a small woman in her 50s with Brandon's eyes and none of his restraint. She didn't knock. She pounded. Arthur opened the door with practiced caution. Can I help you? You Arthur Rios? I am. I'm Bobby Lindsay, Brandon's mother. She pushed past him into his house before he could object. We need to talk about what you did to my son. Arthur closed the door, stayed between Bobby and the rest of his house. What I did was defend my daughter from your son's abuse. Abuse? Brandon loved Hannah. He made mistakes, sure, but you nearly killed him. You sent him running across state lines like a criminal. He is a criminal. He violated a restraining order, stalked my daughter, and assaulted her. Everything I did was legal self-defense and protection." Bobby's face reddened. "Legal? You attacked him at his job. You threatened him. You made my nephew leave town, and now Brandon's hiding in Nevada like he's the victim." "Ma'am, I understand you love your son, but he hurt my daughter. I stopped him. That's the end of the discussion." "It's not the end." Bobby's voice rose to a shriek. "Brandon's seeing a psychiatrist now. He's on medication. He's having panic attacks because of what you did. You traumatized him." Arthur felt something dark stir in his chest. "Your son traumatized my daughter first. He broke her emotionally and nearly broke her physically, so forgive me if I don't have sympathy for his panic attacks." Bobby's eyes filled with tears, but they were angry tears. "You haven't heard the last of this. I've got a lawyer. I'm suing you for assault, for emotional distress, for everything. I'm going to take your house, your savings, everything you've got. And when I'm done, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of violent monster you are." Arthur stepped forward, not threatening, but firm. "You need to leave my house now." "Or what? You'll hurt me too?" "Go ahead. Give me one more thing to take to my lawyer." The standoff lasted 10 seconds before Bobby spun and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Arthur stood in his entryway, calculating. Bobby Lindsay was emotional, reactive, easier to predict than her son or nephew. But a lawsuit was a legitimate threat, and if she had money for a good lawyer, she could make his life hell, even if she didn't win. He called a number he'd hoped never to use again. Jerome Marks answered on the second ring. "Arthur Rios, didn't expect to hear from you." "Detective Marks, I need advice." Jerome had been the investigating officer when Arthur's wife died 4 years ago, a car accident, clean and tragic, and nobody's fault. But Jerome had seen how Arthur grieved, had seen the Delta Force operator beneath the civilian facade, and had stayed in touch. They weren't friends, but they understood each other. "What kind of advice?" Arthur explained the situation. Brandon, Hannah, the confrontation. Clint, now Bobby, and her threat of legal action. Jerome was quiet for a moment. "You're in a complicated position. Technically, you did assault multiple people at that warehouse. The fact that charges didn't stick doesn't mean they couldn't be refiled, and if Bobby Lindsay's lawyer is smart, they'll frame this as an unprovoked attack by a trained killer on their poor, misunderstood son." "He broke my daughter's arm, Jerome." "Did he? Or did he just grab her wrist? Because unless you've got medical documentation of a break, it's going to be hard to prove." Arthur's stomach dropped. Hannah had refused to go to the hospital, insisting it was just bruised. He'd accepted her choice then. Now it might cost them both. "What do you recommend?" "Document everything. Every threat Brandon made, every violation of the restraining order, every witness to his behavior. Build your case before Bobby builds hers. And Arthur, stay away from the Lindsays, all of them. Don't give them any more ammunition." Arthur agreed and ended the call. Then he called Hannah. "Honey, I need you to tell me everything Brandon ever did or said to you. Everything. We're going to document it all." Chapter 8. The Trap. Within a Trap. Hannah's documentation was damning. Text messages where Brandon threatened to make her sorry, voicemails where he screamed obscenities, photos of bruises he'd left. Marlene Collins provided a witness statement describing times she'd seen Brandon grab Hannah roughly. A co-worker at Hannah's office confirmed Brandon had shown up multiple times, despite being told to leave. Arthur compiled it all into a folder that would make any lawyer think twice. But he knew documentation wasn't enough. Bobby Lindsay wasn't going to sue him for assault. She was going to pay someone to hurt him. That's how people like her operated. They couldn't beat you legally, so they beat you literally. Arthur had 3 days to prepare before his suspicions proved correct. The man who came for him wasn't subtle. He didn't need to be. His name was Justin Peters. Arthur learned this later, and he was a local enforcer who did work for anyone who paid cash. Bobby had paid him $5,000 to teach Arthur Rios a lesson. Justin made his move in the parking lot of the grocery store, approaching Arthur as he loaded bags into his truck. "Arthur Rios? Arthur turned, saw the cheap brass knuckles poorly concealed in Justin's hand. "Can I help you?" "Bobby Lindsay says hello." Justin swung. Arthur blocked with his forearm. Impact sent pain shooting up to his elbow, but the bones held, and countered with a palm strike to Justin's throat. Justin stumbled back, gagging, and Arthur swept his leg. Justin hit the pavement hard. "Stay down," Arthur said. Justin didn't stay down. He rolled, came up with a knife. A real one this time, 6-inch. Blade, and lunged. Arthur caught his wrist, twisted, hyperextended the elbow. The knife clattered away. Arthur drove his knee into Justin's ribs, heard something crack, and let him fall. "Who hired you?" Arthur asked quietly. Justin spat blood. "Go to hell!" Arthur pressed his foot against Justin's broken ribs, applied pressure. Justin screamed. "Who hired you?" Bobby Lindsay. She paid me $5,000 to mess you up." Arthur released the pressure, pulled out his phone, dialed 911. "I need police at Morrison's Grocery, south parking lot. A man just attacked me with a knife. He's injured and subdued." He stayed until the police arrived, gave his statement, provided witness contact information from 2 shoppers who'd seen the attack. Justin Peters was arrested, charged with assault with a deadly weapon. And when questioned, he admitted Bobby had hired him. Detective Jerome Marks showed up at the scene, surveyed the damage, and shook his head. "You're either the luckiest man alive or the most prepared." "Prepared?" Arthur said. "I knew she'd escalate." "You knew she'd hire someone to attack you?" "I knew she was emotional and vindictive. The rest was probability." Jerome lowered his voice. "Arthur, this is going to sound crazy, but did you let this happen? Did you bait her into doing something illegal so you could turn it around on her?" Arthur met his eyes. "Would that be wrong?" "It would be brilliant. Also, probably entrapment if anyone could prove it, but mostly brilliant." Jerome glanced at Justin, who was being loaded into an ambulance under police custody. "Bobby Lindsay is going to be arrested for conspiracy to commit assault. With Peter's testimony, she's looking at real charges. Her lawsuit's dead, her credibility's destroyed, and her son's probably going to stay in Nevada for the foreseeable future." "Good," Arthur said simply. "Just be careful. These people have a way of coming back when you think you've won." Arthur thought about Clint Lindsay, about the hitman who disappeared into the shadows. Jerome was right. This wasn't over yet. But Arthur was ready. Chapter 9. The Last Mistake. 3 weeks later, Arthur sat in his backyard workshop building a birdhouse for Hannah's new apartment. She was thriving now. Therapy was helping, work was going well, and she'd even started dating someone new. Someone kind. Wesley had vetted him personally. Arthur had almost convinced himself the threat was over. Bobby was awaiting trial. Brandon was in Nevada, keeping his head down. Clint had vanished. Life had returned to something resembling peace. That's when his security camera alert chimed. Arthur checked his phone. Someone at the back fence, moving slowly, deliberately. The thermal signature suggested one person, but the movement pattern was professional. Clint. Arthur closed the workshop door, locked it from inside, and waited. He wasn't armed, stupid, complacent. He'd let his guard down, but the workshop had tools. He palmed a chisel, held it like a knife, and positioned himself behind a workbench with clear sight lines to both entrances. The back door exploded inward, not picked, not finessed, but kicked open with overwhelming force. Clint entered fast, weapon up, sweeping for targets. He found Arthur behind the bench. "You ruined my cousin's life," Clint said, voice flat. "Cost me my reputation, cost Bobby her freedom. This ends tonight." "You could walk away," Arthur said. "The video's still backed up. You shoot me, it goes public, and your career is over anyway." "Already over. You made sure of that. Now I'm just cleaning up loose ends before I disappear." Clint raised his pistol. Arthur threw the chisel, not at Clint, but at the overhead light. The bulb exploded, plunging the workshop into darkness. Clint fired 3 times, muzzle flashes lighting his face, rounds punching through the workbench. But Arthur wasn't there anymore. He'd dropped the moment the light went out, rolled left, came up near the side door. Clint was good, but Arthur had spent 19 years training in darkness. He moved by sound, by memory, by instinct. He grabbed a metal toolbox, threw it toward the center of the room. Clint fired at the sound. Arthur closed the distance from behind. The fight was brutal and silent. Arthur's hand locked around Clint's gun wrist, Clint's elbow driving into Arthur's ribs, both men grappling for control. They crashed into the wall, broke apart, circled in the darkness. Clint fired again, wild, desperate. The round ricocheted off concrete. Arthur tackled him, drove him into the workbench. The gun skittered away. They fought with fists, elbows, headbutts. Clint was younger, faster. Arthur was meaner, more experienced. Arthur got Clint in a chokehold, squeezed. Clint thrashed, trying to break free, but Arthur held on. Seconds passed. Clint's movements weakened, then went still. Arthur held the choke for another 30 seconds to be sure, then released. Clint collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Arthur flicked on his phone flashlight, found Clint's gun, secured it. Then he cable-tied Clint's hands and feet with zip ties from his workbench. Only when Clint was completely immobilized did Arthur call 911. "I need police at my residence. An armed intruder broke into my workshop and attempted to kill me. He's subdued, but needs medical attention." The police arrived within minutes. So did Detective Jerome Marks, who seemed to be making Arthur's crises his personal overtime project. "Let me guess," Jerome said, surveying the destroyed workshop. "Self-defense again." "Check the security cameras," Arthur said. "He kicked in my door, came in armed, fired multiple shots. I defended myself." The footage backed up every word. Clint Lindsay was arrested on multiple charges: attempted murder, breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon. With his record as a known hitman, he was looking at 20 years minimum. As paramedics loaded Clint into an ambulance, Jerome pulled Arthur aside. "That's 3 separate incidents in a month. You've hospitalized 8 people, subdued a hitman twice, and documented enough evidence to bury an entire family of criminals. That's not luck, Arthur. That's a campaign. It's defense of my family. It's warfare, and you're winning." Jerome studied him. "Question is, when do you stop? When is your daughter safe enough? When is the threat eliminated enough? Because I've seen men like you before. They don't stop until everyone's buried." Arthur looked at the ambulance carrying Clint away, then at his destroyed workshop, then at his phone where Hannah had texted, "Dad, are you okay? The police scanner app says something happened at your address." He typed back, "Everything's fine, honey, just a home repair issue." To Jerome, he said, "I stop when my daughter can live without fear, not a moment before." Jerome nodded slowly. "Then I hope you've reached that point, because vigilante justice has a way of becoming the thing it's fighting against." "I'm not a vigilante," Arthur said. "I'm just a father." 3 months later, Arthur stood in Hannah's new apartment, helping her hang curtains. The place was bright, secure, and far enough from her old neighborhood to feel like a fresh start. She'd gained weight back, smiled more, laughed easier. "Dad," she said, measuring the curtain rod, "I've been meaning to ask. Everything that happened with Brandon, with his family, did you plan all of it?" Arthur held the level steady against the wall. "I planned to keep you safe. But the way it worked out, Brandon gone, Clint in prison, Bobby facing charges, everyone who hurt me facing consequences, that doesn't feel like coincidence." "Sometimes the guilty punish themselves," Arthur said. "They make choices that lead to consequences. I just ensured the consequences happened." Hannah set down her measuring tape and hugged him. "Thank you for everything, for being strong when I couldn't be, for being smart when I was scared, for being my dad." Arthur held his daughter, felt her heartbeat steady and strong, and knew that every choice he'd made had been worth it. The violence, the risk, the darkness he'd pulled from his Delta Force past, all of it had been necessary to protect the one thing that mattered. "I'll always be your dad," he said, "and I'll always protect you, no matter what it costs." Wesley called that evening while Arthur was driving home. "Heard Clint took a plea deal, 25 years, eligible for parole in 15. That's the end of the Lindsay family saga?" "Good," Arthur said. "You did it, man. You protected Hannah, eliminated the threat, and stayed on the right side of the law. Barely. How does it feel?" Arthur thought about the question. How did it feel to win, to survive, To be the father his daughter needed even when it meant becoming someone dangerous? "It feels like Tuesday," he said finally. Wesley laughed. "Delta Force never really leaves, does it?" "No," Arthur agreed. "It doesn't." He drove home through familiar streets, past familiar landmarks, to his familiar house, with its repaired workshop and upgraded security. Tomorrow he'd have coffee at the diner, work out at Wesley's gym, maybe start another project in the workshop. Life would continue being normal until it wasn't, until someone else threatened his daughter, or his home, or his peace. And then Arthur Rios, 53 years old, retired Delta Force operator, father, protector, would do what needed to be done. Again. Because that's what fathers do. They protect, they defend, they eliminate threats, and sometimes, if you're very good and very careful, you do it legally, but if not? Well, Arthur Rios had 19 years of experience making problems disappear. He'd hoped retirement meant those skills would rust away, forgotten. He'd been wrong, and the world was safer for it, or at least Hannah was. And in the end, that was all that mattered.
And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.